Hi students, I want to go ahead and share with you guys the solution to your day one server challenge. Hopefully you've already cloned and npm installed and nodemon the project. So Bron's description says, make a user/create endpoint that will let the user send a new user object through the server to the database. The server should store the user object sent and send a response to the user with a 200 OK status code and the user object saved if successful. If the operation fails, the server should respond with a 500 code and an error message back. I want to do a quick check to make sure. Sweet. Okay, so index is already routing to the user controller if it's /user in the path. Just wanted to make sure about that. Okay, so we've got all our imports set up. We've got JOT and bcrypt handy to make a session token into hash or passwords respectively. We've got our user import so we can use the user model. So I'm going to go ahead and start with, this is not an app, this is a router dot post. It's your HTTP verb. This is a /create. And then if we hover over post, path, handlers. Okay, that's not super descriptive. So you see that in the blue path, our path parameters, that's /create. And then our handlers, a handler is a way of saying, in the broadest terms, it's a function that handles the process, some sort of process that gets initiated. So when the server sees this /create, we go to the callback function or this handler to handle that operation. So in Express, we've got out of the box the request and response objects. Let's go ahead and grab those. So for /create, we want to make a new user. So we're going to use our user model. And then if I hit C, I see, oh, there's a create method here. We get to define what gets created in the database. Well, I'm going to go super simple. I'm just going to say whatever is created in the database to make a new user is referred to by the body. So the body of the request coming in needs to have, if we look at the user model, a username and password in it. I think, I didn't test this earlier, but I think that if the request body has extra information, that's actually going to break this part. We're trying to create information from all of the request body, so if we had an extra parameter, our user model wouldn't handle it, and I think that this would break down. If you think about the promise chaining, the .then, .catch, I think it would go to the .catch if we had extra data. But we may be able to test that in a little bit. Okay, so once a user gets created, the database gives us back that user data, which we'll handle in a .then. So we can say user, and then let's send a response, the status code of 200, and we'll JSONify the user data. Okay, if this process breaks down, we'll catch with an error, and we will res.status 500, and we'll send a JSON object back with that error. Okay, so let's go ahead and test that this works. Let me delete the object I was using earlier, the PewDiePie object. Not that I'm a fan, but I teased Chad about it on like Thursday, and so it's just kind of stuck with me. So anyway, user/create, username and password is all set up. Our server's running, so if I send this through, I get, sweet, I get ID 33, so I've sent a lot of user objects through. I've used this same database across a couple of classes. Username and unhashed password updated created. Sweet, so there is bronze. Silver, let's go ahead and do this. Do all of bronze, we've done that. But this time create a user login endpoint that will let the user send a user object through the server and check with an existing user in the database. On success, the user object should be sent back with an appropriate status code. On failure, an appropriate status code and an error message should be sent. Good luck. Okay, so if we're logging in, we're not getting data from the database. Gets don't let you send request data. It's still in some like classic web design sense, we're still posting to the database, even if we're not creating new data. So a post is not synonymous with a new record or row being created in your database. It's not always true. Let's go ahead and do a router.post here again. And this is a /login. And we have our callback function, rec and res. And with our request and our response, this time instead of a user.create, we want a user. This is another method built into SQLize, find one. Find one lets you specify an options object. One of the parameters in the options object we can use is where, which lets us clarify what the values of our record should be. What do I mean by that? Well, coming through to post this login, we've got a request body. We want the username to be rec.body.username. We want the, this is going to be a little ugly. Let me spread this across 2 lines. The username to be rec.body.username and the password to be rec.body.password. Okay. Then, let's see, am I missing anything? So find one, then, okay. With that user, send back a status code of 200 with a JSON object that is the user data, and then we'll catch any errors and send back 500 with the JSON object of those errors. Okay, so if I come over here and I user login, remember the request body is the same as last time because I'd like to see a success here. Send that through. We get the user object ID 33, so that's telling me I'm not creating something new because when we did /create last time, I got 33 back. And that's a phone call. I'm just going to talk over it. So what else am I missing here? Oh, I want to make sure that this is breaking correctly if we don't send good data, rather than just assuming the break's working as expected. So I've got pew 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 here for the password, and if I send that through, I get null. Okay, and that makes sense. We don't have a user with PewDiePie as a username and pew pew as a password. Go back to the correct password, I see the user data again. Okay, all right. So those are pretty fast. Those are sleek. However, we're not doing a couple of useful things. We're not hashing our password, so it's in plain text. If I go into pgadmin and refresh my table, I see pew pew as my password. That's not what I want. That's a security vulnerability. Anyone managing the database can see and access that. Or as some of you guys have said, anyone managing the database, even if it is hashed, if they know the encryption algorithm, that's a security vulnerability too. But at any rate, we want to hash this guy, and that's part of the gold level challenge. Make sure that passwords are saved encrypted. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and do that? Oh, and when either endpoint sends the user information back, make sure that information is sent in a session token using JWT, using JOT. Well, bcrypt for hashing your passwords and comparing strings to hash passwords is an import we've already got access to. JOT is available there for us for encrypting and decrypting our session token. So what we can do here, we want to, rather than, okay, so the /create does not want to use the body data to make the new object. We want to be a little bit more explicit than that. Let's go ahead and say let, so we've got a username, we've got a password. Let's go ahead and say let hashed pass equal rec, whoop, bcrypt is our package for doing the encryption or the hashing here. And that is hash sync that we want to use. What does it take? It takes a string. It takes a salt, which is which can be a lot of things. the number that we're going to specify is the number of times the bcrypt is actually going to generate a salt for us, and we're going to specify that we want to use that 10 times. And then we can also, and yeah, that's what we're going to go with here. So we want to say the hashed password is rec.body.password, and we want to do this 10 times. And we want to create a new user from this with a username coming from the request body of username. And our password is now hashed pass. Okay? So let's go ahead and test this. Let's make sure in Postman a new user created will hash the password. So I'm going to delete the old PewDiePie here. And if I send this through, oh, I had login. I want create, post, and cool, the password is now hashed. Awesome. Okay, that doesn't take care of the other thing that we need to do, and that is to generate a session token. Well, let's think about where in the body of our code, in at least the create endpoint, we want to generate a session token. We don't care about that for the creation's sake. If the creation breaks, go down to the dot catch. They don't need a session token if this method breaks. I think we want it in the dot then. If we've successfully created a user, we grab that user data. We want to send the user data back, but we want to send encrypted user data as well, so they can use that as that bracelet to send and receive across the web as their admission token to the server. So why don't we go ahead and build this out a little bit? Instead of just saying, hey, the user is the object we're sending back, let's be explicit. Let's send back a user object here. And, oh, nope, I got to do a couple of things. Let me leave it like that. And grab all of this. So I'm going to make a longer body to this fat arrow function, to its function definition. I want to say let token equal jot.sign, and that takes a payload. I'm going to send which needs to be an object. Found this out after about half an hour of playing with it. I wasn't sending an object to jot.sign, and it needs to be. The ID I want to send is user.id. It takes a secret or private key. So I'll say this is a secret. And then options can include the expires, how the length of time before it expires, and I can say 1 day. I don't have to do 60 times 60 times 24. You can actually specify more like plain, not plain text, but non-calculation stuff, and Jot will interpret that and set your expiration time appropriately. So now that we've got a token, we want to send back status code saying everything was okay, a JSON object. This time, let's send a few things. Let's say that our user data is the user that got returned from the database. Let's send back a message. This was successfully created. And let's send a session token back of token. Okay. We're still catching any errors that we've got here. And yeah, let's see how this goes. So post has been built out significantly now. Let's user create. It's not going to let me do that because I can't have duplicate usernames. So I need to first delete PewDiePie so I can create PewDiePie. And there we go. Cool. We get the user, the message, and the session token. All of that was explicitly defined here. User, message, session token. Sweet. Okay. So I think we're good to go for gold on the create endpoint. Now for the potentially longer job of the login. So how do we refactor this? Well, let me think real quick. We need to, so a password coming in is going to not be hashed. We want to compare that against the hashed passwords in the database. So I think what we want to do is kind of chunk this up. Here's the logic that I'm going to go for. I'm going to, based upon the request body coming in, I'm going to first find the username in the database matching the username in the request body. Once that's happened, then secondarily, I want to compare the hash password to the password coming in from the request body. If the passwords match, then we'll send back an OK status code. And if they don't, we'll send back a invalid authentication status code, or message rather. So I'm going to gut a little bit of this. I don't want to do a find one on the password because the users won't have the hash password in the request body. So I want to find one. Let me do this. I want to do a find one just on the username. Okay. And then I want to say .then with that user. What do you want to do with that user? Let's go ahead and keep the .catch. If there's an error, res.status 500, and we'll send back a JSON object consisting of that error message. App crashed. Yeah, I've got a syntax error here. With that user data, we're going to have a longer function body here. We're going to say so bcrypt compare is a built-in method in bcrypt that will compare a string to a hashed password and give you a true or a false back accordingly. So I'm going to say let valid user equal bcrypt.compare, and my incoming string should be rec.body.password, right? That's not hashed. And the hashed password should be user.password. Okay? And then I'm going to do a console log on valid user to make sure that I'm doing this correctly. And then if I don't send a status message back from the server's just going to hang and the client will never get something. And so the client's going to keep waiting. The server's going to keep waiting because it never hits a response. So we need to complete this communication circuit by sending back a response. So I'm going to say 200 JSON message of, our message is everything A-OK. All right, so next up, let's go ahead and log in. And because I'm doing this console log of valid user server side, I'm going to see at my server console here. Hopefully I'll see a 200 and everything A-OK. If not, I'll have some digging to do to figure this one out. So we've got user login, PewDiePie pew pew, and I see 200. Ah, okay, cool. Sweet, I was hoping for that. So what does this tell us? We're getting OK back, everything A-OK. So we're getting through this body of the code just fine, which means that A, we're grabbing a user in the database based upon the username, and that, oh, promise pending. Oh, maybe I lied. Maybe I lied. Okay, so I don't, here's the thing. Compare, bcrypt compare returns a promise. We sent this back. Bcrypt compare returns a promise. So to handle that promise, rather than setting it to a variable, I want to do a .then and a .catch. So I'm going to gut this a little bit. So we're going to start with the bcrypt compare and then say .then. Valid user is the response we get back from bcrypt compare. So I'm going to console log this, valid user, and then I'll send back that status code of 200 with a JSON of message of everything A-OK. Okay, so let's check this out one more time. Now if I log in, I get, that's what we wanted. So the message is good. And in the console, I now see true. So that's telling me that the request body password coming in is successfully being compared against the hashed password, and we're seeing true, so they match. So bcrypt compare is passing down a promise to the .then, and the value of that promise is true for our valid user variable. Sweet. Let's try something. Let's see if we get false if we change up the password. Instead of pew pew, let's do pew pew pew, and we see false. Sweet. So this is what we can use. We can say, hey, if valid user is true, send back a successful authentication to the client with a session token. If valid user is false, then send back, hey, invalid credentials or unsuccessful login. Try again, something like that. Okay, so we can build this out. We can say if valid user, if things went okay, then we first need a session token. Token equal jot.sign. What's the body of our token? We want an ID of user.id. What else do we want? We want our encryption secret. This is a secret. So does that match the above? Oh, I want no E at the end of secret there. And then we want to let the expiration time be a day. So I'll just copy this. Paste it down below. Cool. So we've got a token set up. And then let's send back a status code of 200 with a JSON object consisting of our user is our user data. The message is successfully logged in. And then our session token is our token. Okay? Else, we send back 500, just a generic, hey, there's something wrong, with a JSON of message. Oh, what did I do? I typed something wrong. Oh, I need parentheses here. A JSON object with a message of invalid login. Okay, so now I'm going to come back to Postman and try this out again. If I do pew pew pew, invalid login, good, that's what we want. If I do pew pew, I send and I see my user data back. Cool, sweet. A lot of complexity here. This is tricky. I encourage you to dig into the JOT and the bcrypt NPM docs. They're not written at a really great introductory level. I'm just going to throw that out there. I was kind of stumbling through those earlier. They're good, but they're a little challenging. However, it's good to be challenged. You need to push yourself and grow that, as we call it, the struggle muscle. You need to be comfortable reading the docs and internalizing information that's sometimes challenging. And if you read something you don't understand, be resourceful and time box yourself. Don't spin and just sit and stare at one web page that's written in a confusing way. Go find an alternative resource to help you out. Anyway, hey, pleasure working with you guys. I'll see you tomorrow morning, and have a happy Monday, I guess.